Now, the Nigeria Civil Society Situation Room, as we mentioned earlier on today in the program, has urged the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, to cancel the governorship and senatorial elections that took place in Kogi State over the weekend. It said that the call was necessitated due to a high level of violence and electoral malpractices that took place in the election in the state, or during rather. Now, the Situation Room also expressed disappointment with the conduct of the governorship election in Bayelsa State, which it said fell below standards. In its preliminary report on the assessment of the just concluded elections in both Bayelsa and Kogi states, the Civil Society Coalition called for serious investigation into alleged cases of vote buying, involvement of security personnel in vote snatching, and other forms of security breaches. Well, to discuss this and more, Barrister Esther Uzoma, alternate chair of the Nigeria Civil Society Situation Room, joins us now from our Arise Abuja studio. Good morning, ma'am. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning.
Good morning, Laila. Good morning, Nigerians.
Good morning, and, very kind of you to have accepted our invitation to appear on this program this morning.
Yes.
Thank you very much indeed. Now,
thank you.
Let's start with the elections.
Thank you, Mr. Ruben.
Yes, let's start with the elections conducted in Kogi and Bayelsa states last weekend. Many observers, including the Campaign for Democracy and Development at a session yesterday, have called on the president to provide leadership. What kind of leadership do you think that these observers want President Buhari to provide in this situation? I mean, it was not the one that conducted the election, but it looks like CDD, for example, is placing the buck right before him on his desk.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Ruben. To the extent that President Muhammadu Buhari is the chief priest, of Nigerian electoral process, and indeed the Nigerian state, to the extent that he's the chief security officer, to the extent that he's the chief executive. Now, Nigeria civil society generally is saying to him, Daddy, what happened on the 16th of November fell short of democratic traditions, to the extent that the buck stops on the table of Mr. President. That is why, indeed, Nigerian Civil Society Situation Room, and indeed, civil society is calling on Mr. President. It is time for his body language to speak. And we are asking at this time, sir, because remember, the standard of body language is the standard set by the handlers of Mr. President. Yes, so we are asking now, Mr. President, what is your body language? On the 16th of November, what we had was vampire elections. On the 16th of November, it was a bloodbath. It was Dracula elections. The currency of Nigerian politics, as seen on the 16th of November, was blood of innocent citizens. And we are saying that this is the time for body language. Mr. President, what are you saying?
Barrister
Let your
Uzoma,
body language detest the excesses. Yes.
Several groups just like yours have condemned these attacks and these elections, I beg your pardon, and rightfully so for many reasons. But I want us to break down the observations that you have with the Nigeria Civil Society Situation Room about these elections that were conducted in Kogi and Bayelsa State. What were the observations, the key observations that you found?
Thank you very much. Now, in Kogi and Bayelsa, Nigeria Civil Society Situation Room deployed observers. And our key observations were that it was marred by widespread violence. We also observed in Kogi the seeming collusion with agencies of state to generally frighten voters, generally particularly perhaps in strongholds, perceived strongholds of some of opposition, we saw the excesses of officers of state using the very cohesive forces of state to scare Nigerian citizens. In Bayelsa, what happened was that, recall, there's an existing state of affairs in Bayelsa. And so when the elections came, 16th November, what we saw was that the peace in Bayelsa, which is an already negotiated peace, was brought to bear. And so territories that were already considered, you will see Nigerian army telling you, even Nigerian police telling you, do not go here. Do not step here. The sense that, oh, these are, considered territories. Ekeremo, you see that. In Nebe, you will see that. So in these areas, people were holding their peace. And so agencies of indigenes of Ekeremo and Nembe were saying, this is where we draw the line. Agencies of state will say on one side, then the forces in Ekeremo or Nembe will stay on the other side, and they will now tell us, say, listen, do not cross this line. The forces of state will tell you, if you cross this line, you're on your own. So that is the level that violence came to play. Violence was the determinant factor in both elections on who emerges. Regrettably, it appears that when forces that exist outside the law, when outlaws make decisions and concede territories to themselves, we now use elections to give a veneer of legitimacy to these concessions made by persons living outside the fringes of the law, outlaws. So we see it happening in the Northeast, we see it happening in the South, and it played out in November 16th elections.
Well, we'll take a break shortly, but I wanted to ask you, this whole point that civil society is making about President Buhari taking responsibility. You are aware that the president has already congratulated the governor in Kogi State. He has also congratulated the APC gubernatorial candidate in Bayelsa. In fact, he met with David Leon of Bayelsa, I think yesterday. And the APC chairman, Adams Ushomole, says the president now has a brand new baby boy. Now, civil society is calling for the cancellation of the elections. How? Whose responsibility is it? Is it the president's responsibility? We'll take a short break. When we return, you can then give us your thoughts on this. We'll be right back. It's the Morning Show.
Very well.
Welcome back to the Morning Show here on the Arise News Channel. Still with us, we have Barrister Esther Uzoma, alternate chair, Nigeria Civil Society Situation Room, who is in our Arise Abuja studio. Well, before we went on break, I had raised a question that you are asking President Buhari to do this and that. What exactly does civil society want him to do, considering the fact that he has already congratulated the winners in both Kogi and Bayelsa State, and the chairman of the APC has presented to him the winner, the APC winner in Bayelsa, whom Oshomole, the chairman, describes as a brand new baby boy. You want the president to throw away this new brand, this brand new baby boy?
Yes, you see, the president is representative of so many things. Besides being the chief executive officer of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, besides being the father of the nation, the body language, I use this word advisedly because it was the handlers of Mr. President that brought in this phrase. Now, what is the body language of the president? Congratulating persons who emerged through a very process, a process that is not free and fair. What is his body language? That is the question to ask. You see, Remember that power determines meaning. Nothing means anything. Everything only means what power determines that it means. And so, if Mr. President, who is the most powerful individual in this country, that is pursuant to our constitution, congratulates these persons, it appears he is saying, you know, it doesn't matter what happens. All that matters is that you won. And we are talking about a process that consumed citizens. And we are talking about a process that every Nigerian citizen is saying, listen, the forces of state were complicit. We are talking about a process that did not, you know, abide by its own constitutionally provided, you know, laws and guidelines. And we have Mr. President. We are saying, Mr. President, what your body language at this point should be such that detests at least such things, such anomalies. Mr. President, by your body language of congratulating these new babies, you are not listening to Nigerian people. You are not listening to observers, the ones that were attacked, whose phones were destroyed, who were kidnapped and kept in custody. Mr. President, you are not listening to the voices of 20 INEC staff that were kidnapped. Mr. President, you are not listening. As a father of a nation, we are saying that this process was mad. What we are saying is that the very laws, our constitution was desecrated in November 16th.
Barrister.
Mr. President, you know, the least that your body language can do is at least not welcome and congratulate them. Let them go through whatever they have to go through. But by welcoming them and saluting them, it's like Mr. President has given a veneer of validity.
Certainly, Barrister, and this is an election. This is an election that has been condemned not only here at home in Nigeria, but also by the EU and other bodies. But I wanted to touch on something that you said, because you said that the violence was the determining factor of these elections. And you spoke about reports from the Situation Room, the Nigeria Civil Society Situation Room, on basically the police colluding with thugs, etc., in the states to go along with certain activities that we do not want to see coming from our police force or any security agency or body that is responsible for something or another in these elections. So, first of all, is this proof that the Situation Room was able to catch and record, get video evidence of, anything like that? That's firstly. And secondly, how does the Situation Room want to go about addressing this? Because I don't think this is a subject that can just be dropped. And it's certainly also a topic that has been raised and brought up by several other civil society organizations that also observe the elections. So what needs to be done about this?
Thank you very much. A lot of things needs to be done. Number one, the amendments to the Electoral Act that we requested that Mr. President sign in his first tenure. This is a good time to sign it. You see, this second tenure of Mr. President is for him to set legacies. What more can he become in Nigeria after being the president? So this is the time and opportunity for him to write his name in gold. And so we are saying, the amendments proposed to the Electoral Act, can Mr. President please, sign it into law? Secondly, we are calling for the establishment of Electoral Offences Commission that would promptly try persons who are found culpable. These are the two outstanding things. And above all, the executive must exhibit their eagerness to obey court orders. Because when the orders and judgments of our courts, when the prophecies of our court are despised, particularly by the executive arm, let me tell you, it gives everybody, particular outlaws, the impression that these laws do not exist. It gives them the impression that if you have a gun, you can negotiate with the state. And continually validating the product of this election seems to give that impression. All you need to do is take up arms. If you take up arms, whether you take it up in the northeast, whether you take it up in north central, whether you take it up in the south, you can get what you want. This is not the Nigeria of my dreams, Mr. President. You must so moving ahead, strict obedience to court orders, signing into law the amendments to the Electoral Act, and establishment of an Electoral Offences Commission, so that no matter whose ox is God, let bring people subject to our laws. Otherwise, we lose our Nigerianness.
Well, I mean, let's talk about INEC. INEC is the umpire in these elections. And before the November 16 elections, the chairman of INEC and other officials of INEC assured Nigerians that they had learned a lot of lessons from the February-March elections and that we could all be sure that the elections on November 16 will be hitch-free. Now, based on what you have said, do you have any blame or words of praise for INEC?
You see, thank you very much. Let me take Bayelsa, for instance. And so we were at the Ministry of Transport jetty to observe the deployment of gunboats that were supposed to deploy to escort INEC boats bearing materials on the eve of the elections. And so the Nigerian Navy came, the Nigerian Army came, about 60 gunboats, sufficient to take out smaller countries, were there. Everybody was waiting, all right? The materials did not come. And we went, when we left there, we went to say, what is happening? You know what happened? The persons who were supposed to transport materials, the transporters said, listen, who have already received 50% of their payments, who even entered into a contract with INEC, said, well, we're not going anywhere. Someone else gave us some money, and we are not moving. And so this is the tragedy. We already run a dysfunctional system. You enter into contract with persons to convey goods. On the day of execution, they say, listen, we're not going anywhere. Take us to court. Those were their words to INEC. What will INEC do? We have an inefficient transport system. Do we expect it to function properly because it's election day? What I'm telling you is that from an observer perspective, this was what happened. And so they waited, and the Navy were concerned that, listen, they're going to spend about 6 to 7 hours on the high sea, and they need to move with light. They had their dry packs, everybody, civil defense, they were already waiting for the materials to come. And the persons who were supposed, according to law, to transport materials from CBN to the jetty said, we're not going anywhere. What are you going to do? And so we have INEC. All right? INEC has its own problem, but we have INEC struggling to function in a dysfunctional society. What magic, what really can they do? So, this is the problem. Logistics said somebody else gave us money. And so we saw this one playing out. That was why polls, for instance, did not open on time. So at some point, you know, we as Nigerians, we have to arise and save the soul of this country. Men who are bearing arms can no longer dictate the tenets of our democracy. At some point, Nigerian citizens will have to say enough. That bearing gun is not sexy. Let me use that word. We have to invent strict intellectual aluta. Bring our elected officials to question. So, if INEC can, what can INEC do really? INEC is not a gun-bearing institution. I'm not saying INEC is perfect, but look at the scenario that played out. And we see this repeatedly. It happened in 2019 elections, general elections. It also played out in November 16th elections.
Well, thank you very much, Esther Uzoma, for this field report and detailed analysis of what happened in Kogi and Bayelsa State on November 16th. Thank you very much indeed.